The highest form of wealth is being able to wake up every day and say, I can do whatever I want. Hi, I'm Chris, I'm a doctor. I've broken this book down into 4 parts, really to help you get to that feeling hopefully one day. People generally want to be wealthier so that they are happier. Now, happiness, as we all know, is a complicated subject because simply everybody is different. But there's this common denominator in happiness, a universal fuel of joy, if you like. It's that people want control of their own lives, the ability to do what they want and with who they want, for as long as you want, is priceless. And this is potentially the highest dividend that money can give you. Now, there's a chap who passed away called Ronald Read. He lived a fairly basic life as mainly a janitor in a school, but when he actually died, he had a fortune of $8 million that he'd amassed, and he's actually now a philanthropist if you look him up on Wikipedia. And you could compare him with somebody called Richard Fuscone, who I think is still alive and on LinkedIn. And he was some kind of hotshot, Harvard-trained investor who seemingly became greedy and had to file for bankruptcy. Education is clearly important, but one of these people who failed had the best education, arguably, and actually the one who succeeded didn't have that. So although education is important, at times financial outcomes are driven by luck, independent of both intelligence and effort. But the difference between these two is really the soft skill, and that's how you actually behave with your money is much more important than what you know. So Ronald Read was just investing all the time throughout his career. Now, interestingly, when you're born actually relates a lot to your opinions on investing and how you think about how to manage your money. Because if you're born and inflation is high, you'd actually invest less of your money in bonds in life compared to those who grew up if inflation is low. And if you happen to actually grow up when the stock market was strong, you'll invest more of your monies in stocks later in life compared to those who grew up when the stock market was weak. So perhaps surprisingly, an independent investor's willingness to bear risk depends on their own personal history. That's the main thing. It's not their intelligence, their education, or any level of sophistication. If you look at the USA, the lowest income households spend on average $412 a year on lottery tickets. And that's 4 times the amount of those in the highest income groups. And it's of note that there's a large number of Americans, 40%, cannot come up with $400 in case of an emergency. And therefore, it's almost the same people who don't have that $400 reserve who are buying the lottery tickets. Now, you may think, this is nuts. Why don't they keep that? Well, if you think of it, it's not that bizarre, because holding that lottery ticket provides that individual with hope that they will achieve that dream that hopefully you've all got already. And that's that you can get the good stuff and that you can actually take for granted when you've got it. In other words, they're paying for this dream. And if you already have that dream, you won't understand because you've already got that. Now, few people are analytical enough to just make financial decisions with a spreadsheet. In fact, people discuss this with friends, colleagues over dinner, in a company meeting, and places where an individual's personal history, which includes their unique view of the world, importantly, their ego, pride, the impact of marketing on them as well, and just various odd incentives are scrambled together in a narrative that would work for that individual. So it's hard to quantify luck, and rude to suggest that people success is owed to them, because there's this default stance that we'd all say, well, we'd ignore luck as a factor for success. There was an economist called Bhaskar Mazumdar, and he's actually shown that incomes amongst brothers are more correlated than their height or weight. So if you find a rich and tall brother, their brother is actually more likely to be rich than they are tall. And you could think about this. Both brothers have grown up potentially with the same opportunities, and the quality of education that they have, and potentially the connections and the doors open, are very much linked to where they grew up, their parents' socioeconomic status. Although, if you go and ask two rich brothers about this study, almost certainly they will deny that the study applies to them. Let's talk about compounding. This is a key factor to being rich, and it isn't intuitive. And we often will actually ignore the power of compounding because we'd focus on solving problems by other means. We're not overthinking things, but we're really just thinking, well, you don't just think about compounding. Unlike Warren Buffett, whom has been investing for almost 75 years, that 3/4 of a century, in which he's been using compound interest to his advantage. The tactic really is to invest and then just shut up and wait. And bear in mind Nassim Taleb's advice, which is having an edge and surviving are two different things. The first requires the second. You need to avoid ruin at all costs. And bear in mind that 4 in 10 public companies actually over time fail. So don't let this be you. Be sure to survive, and then consider about having the edge over others.